Hi everyone, so this is Ansky and we're gonna go through a very different topic today. So effectively I wanted to discuss one question that usually a lot of programmers, especially the starting programmers, always ask, which is which program should I be using? Is there any difference between them and should I maybe learn all of them? Now, obviously, learning all of them is not a way to go. Making a choice depending also on which one is the easiest, which one is the hardest, is also not the way to go. I wouldn't advise that to do this. Different languages are coded a bit differently, but they have a lot of similarities. Alright, so I'm gonna firstly cover the known funny thing, which I realized very early stage in my programming career, which is you have programs like you always either start with a hard language or you start with an easy language. Now, so for example, Python would be considered as something more easier to start with and get your head around. And there is also coding such as Java or C++, which are considered to be a bit harder languages. The funny thing that always comes after is if you start with a harder language, when you look at Python later on, it's just some people find it very confusing. I found myself actually be a bit confused with Python because it was just different. It's just easier, if that makes sense, and it just makes no sense to some extent. On the other hand, if you start with Python, it's much more difficult to jump later on into C++ or Java because it's such a different language. You have to think more into it. Now, this can kind of like sound like I am telling you start with something like C++ or Java and then you can transfer to Python. I'm not gonna tell you this. The reason for that is because it all depends where you're going. This is no something. There's no something like one language easier than the other. The only difference is basics might be easier, but basics are kind of all similar. The syntax is different. Syntax is just the way to effectively write things we have to remember, so the rules. But other than that, it's pretty much very similar. So basics, whether you're gonna do C++, Java, or Python, or any other language for that matter, is gonna come fairly simple. Now, there are some people, and this is one of the most important things which you kind of have to understand, is that there's always two types of people. One type of people that it's incredibly easy to understand coding. It makes sense. Everything just falls into pieces. So as soon as I, for example, tell you something new, it just becomes like the second nature. It makes sense why we follow it this way. The only thing that might end up being a problem is remembering it, how to do this later on, but it all makes sense. On the other hand, there is a second type of people where coding actually doesn't come as a second nature. It seems like unlogical. It makes no sense because it feels like they try to rationalize kind of everything, and the moment when they kind of they stand in front of the program, which apparently is supposed to work like a little baby that has exactly a specific set of instructions, it makes no sense. Why do we, for example, put brackets here? And even when this is being explained, it's still sort of a difficult to understand. With those kind of people, it's very useful to dig very deeply into coding why everything is designed in such a way that it is. This is why, for example, you might find that my videos are not always so small and not so short. It's because I try to sometimes dig more deeper into those. You might not see it yet, but once we're gonna start covering objects or we're gonna start covering way of writing the code, we'll go more deeply into why do we write the way that we do. As an example, especially when we're gonna be talking about the factories and stuff like that, then this is where it's gonna come. I will kind of want to go very deeply because it can be very easy for some people to understand, but for some others it might be very confusing. Now, let's go back to our main topic. Why should we choose one language over the another? The important thing is, depends what you're trying to do. What are you trying to achieve in life? Are you interested in, for example, AI? Are you interested in machine learning or maybe computer vision? Computer vision are effectively just way of, it's effectively just studies where we learn how, for example, we use camera object detection. So, for example, we detect, I don't know, a glass and it tells it's a glass. So, for example, like face detection and stuff like this. Or maybe you're interested more in app development or maybe a website development. Now, each one of those programs, most of them should be able to do everything. But how, like some of the programs are much better at one thing and one thing only. Now, let me give you an example. Java is very good at creating apps, and it's very good at, for example, making it can create games as an example, but C# would be much more preferred, or C++ in order to create games than Java. The reason for that is because you have OpenGL, you have game engines and any different other things that specialize in those languages only. Now, for example, Python would be amazing when it comes to object detection, so computer vision or machine learning. The reason for that is because the amount of mathematical complication it can do, it's just really, really good. And it effectively reduces the difficulty for the developer to have to sit down and think how to improve the efficiency in Java. Like, for example, in my programs, for the program to run smoothly and able to actually have no bugs or just minimum amount of bugs. So this is kind of the important thing. You need to kind of sit down and think which one would you prefer. Now, saying this, it doesn't mean you are not able to learn as many languages as you like. Most of the languages follow the same basic principles. So, for example, you've already learned about integer and boolean in Java. If you're gonna go to, for example, C++ or C#, all of those are there as well. Even in Python has those. The only difference between, for example, Python and the other languages we have to type int before the variable name, and then we have to specify, for example, we can give it a value. In Python, you're unable to do that. We don't have to specify that we're gonna be creating an int. We just create a variable name and then just put =5, and Python will by itself recognize, okay, this is a full number, let me make it an int. If that number will change along the way, for example, Python will know how to automatically change that number to double, for example. Where if we're dealing with Java or C# or C++, this might not be as easy. We have to effectively then recreate a variable or just cast it as a different effectively data type. And this is where the kind of problem begins, and this is the thing that you kind of have to think about. It's less about what program, for example, is commonly used so out there, or which one is easier, because they all do different things. And if, for example, you're gonna start learning Java because you think like, oh, Java is harder, it will help me out with everything else. But then I'm interested incredibly in machine learning, for example, which Python is commonly used for. You might find yourself really quickly that you've learned this Java and you've learned a lot of advanced stuff, and then you go to Python, and then once again, also you try to find a job and they require Python, and you have to sit down there and redo everything. Last thing I want to also mention is it's incredibly important to kind of understand as well that all the languages are fairly simple to learn at the beginning. So basics are very straightforward. Now, does not mean that you can, like, in that way, you can learn all the languages you like. You can learn C++, C#, Java, and Python, or even JavaScript and just many more. But that doesn't make you be able to speak all of the languages. It just makes you able to say effectively basic things. So imagine like in real life, you can learn saying hello in French, Chinese, Japanese, German, Dutch, and English. And you could say, oh yeah, I know many languages. No, you don't, you know, just basics. Then that's where it comes knowing, for example, very specific things, more advanced things, which are not effectively the same way in every other language. Or they are written in a different way. Maybe, for example, there are things, as an example, there is a sorting algorithm in Java where effectively it was designed specifically for Java. It's called a quicksort, and it was only made looking at Java. It has no mathematical effectively background of it, so it makes no sense why it's designed the way that it is. But the reason why it was designed in such a way, because people, when the ones that created quicksort, knew how Java works and how to make it the most efficient and the fastest. And this is one of the fastest sorting algorithms. So effectively, sorting algorithm effectively would mean that if we're gonna put, let's say, bunch of letters or bunch of numbers, it will sort it for us in a way that we want it, maybe ascending order or maybe descending order. So this is effectively how it works. So before you kind of ask yourself about which language should I take, then try to think about what your future goals are. On the other hand, if you cannot figure out what you want to do in the future, you can try learning many different languages. And I'll probably try to cover a lot of basics on this channel, where we'll be covering a lot of basic things like Python, Java, C++, maybe C# as well. Some basic stuff on every single language. Play around with them, find which one finds you the most, it makes you most efficient. It makes you feel that you actually enjoy coding in that language. It makes you want to go back to it, because this is the most important thing. You do not want to get up in the morning and have to, for example, go and speak German if you don't like German, right? You want to wake up in the morning and say, okay, I want to speak German because I like German. So I like going to my work. I like doing those things. So this is one of the important things that you kind of have to think about. So that's pretty much it what I kind of want to talk about today. I'll see you on the next video coming up on Friday. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.